President Trump didn't mention any minority lawmakers by name, not even Elijah Cummings, joking that he didn't want to be controversial. But at a rally in Cincinnati, he took aim at Cummings' town of Baltimore and several other major cities run by Democratic mayors.
The homicide rate in Baltimore is significantly higher than El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. The conditions in Nancy Pelosi's once great city of San Francisco are deplorable. They're deplorable. Look at Los Angeles with the tents and the horrible, horrible, disgusting conditions. Look at San Francisco. Look at some of your other cities.
And Kat, that was just an excerpt of the president's rally. Now that he's broadened his political assault to major American cities, right, most of which do have Democratic mayors and Democratic members of Congress, I've seen few people in the media ask, maybe a sentence here or there, is he offering any solutions? He's the president of urban America as well. Should the media be more focused on that and a little less on the political rhetoric?
Right, I absolutely think so. And people aren't asking that question, which I had the same issue with. Okay, so what do we do about it? Because I think the things he says about Baltimore, those are facts based on statistics. And everybody wanted to focus on whether they were appropriate. The narrative on the left was very much, these are racist. I mean, as you mentioned before, Don Lemon even called them racist when he was supposed to be a moderator, was supposed to be completely non-biased and objective and neutral, which I had a problem with. I didn't see them that way. But I think that, him and Ben Carson should be coming out and talking about this. What do we do about these issues? If the Democrats don't have the solution, what is the solution?
Well, since you mentioned Ben Carson, Kathy, there was some chatter that President Trump might go to Baltimore. He didn't. He sent Ben Carson, who, of course, was a world-renowned Baltimore surgeon, who said, we want to work with local leaders. He actually mentioned Elijah Cummings, but he runs the Housing and Urban Development Department, and he didn't, at least on that day, say, here's some programs we want to change, expand, innovate. And again, I think the media ought to ask not just the White House, but members of Congress, what are you going to do about this?
What a missed opportunity, because I interviewed the former Secretary of HUD, Mel Martinez, and they always...
From the Bush administration.
From the Bush administration, and they had these for the Washington Post, and he had these wonderful points and policy and what they were going to do and those wonderful things. That wasn't my topic, but they were always ideas, and we just don't see that much anymore, and we need that. And some of the poorest states in the United States, Louisiana, Mississippi, they're in the South. There are red states that are suffering right now with red governors. So let's talk policy. Let's clean up America. We have so many issues and so many poor cities across the entire United States. Let's have the Secretary of HUD. What a great opportunity for the conversation. But people don't want to talk policy, it sounds like. As
a reporter who used to cover urban affairs many years ago, I have to ask, do the media really care about the inner cities? Because these are not the viewers and the readers who are most prized by advertisers. There's a sense of exhaustion, I think, after decades of efforts to help these cities, going back to LBJ's Great Society. And I wonder, Kat, whether or not, the reason we're more interested in the politics is because there's a collective shrug of the shoulders. Well, these problems are never going away in cities. And it's not just Baltimore. There are sections here in New York and in Washington and in Chicago and elsewhere where you have rampant crime, drugs, and poverty.
I think that a lot of people in the media now, rather than just having their goal be reporting, a lot of them have a goal that's an outside agenda, some political agenda in some way. So they see a story and they say, how can this be used to support that agenda and further, promote it? And so people see that Trump makes these comments about Cummings and they say, oh, look, racist. Just like we've been saying, Trump's racist. And they're more focused on their angle than they are actually reporting, let alone actually caring about the people who are suffering and, pressuring people for solutions.
And in fact, Kathy, when the president was accused of a racial attack for calling Baltimore disgusting and rat-infested and no human being would want to live there, at least in certain sections, his defenders countered with, well, look at the statistics. Baltimore has the highest homicide rate. Baltimore has this very high poverty rate, although there are sections of Cummings District that are actually much better off. But saying that things are terrible in some parts of Baltimore, does that neutralize the president's attack? Because now we have to circle back to, but in every administration, many administrations have failed to do much about it, including the Obama administration.
But also in defense of reporters, I mean, often reporters can't control what they're going to do. The editors give an angle. So when I interviewed HUD...
What do you mean the editors give an angle?
Well, they absolutely, the story is going to be about how the HUD secretary grew up. Well, when I worked for the Washington Post, how did the HUD secretary grow up? What's his background? How did he become HUD secretary? So I couldn't talk about policy or statistics. I had to talk about his growing up and what he was like. It was factual, but that wasn't wasn't my topic. I had to stay on angle. So to create a story about policy and get people interested, it may be more about the feelings behind it. Jimmy Carter trying to address cities and poverty, and that was a fascinating story, and I was able to write about that because he was fascinating and made it interesting to readers.
You know, policy sounds abstract and boring,
Right.
but we're talking here about human suffering.
Real people.
And
Yeah,
by the way,
feelings.
you know, it's not just a question of throwing federal dollars at cities. You have
we've tried that.
You have cultural problems, single-family households,
Yes.
generations of poverty that breed more generations of poverty, and these are complicated issues for the media, but they just don't get much attention unless a president is on the political attack.
Right, they certainly don't get much attention. I don't know if that's because people don't know what to do, because we have already tried to throw a lot of money at this problem. The federal government has given so much money to Baltimore, and clearly it hasn't been used in the best way, or maybe they're not sure what to do with it, or who knows. The problem is no one's asking that question. People are asking instead, was Trump's rhetoric okay, or what is this politically?
Right.
People are not asking the question
Right.
of, okay, so what do we do about it? Because statistically, there is real suffering.
But
Well,
it's
you
our fault.
got to go, but you just asked the question, and I think the media should do asking more of such questions. That's part of our
It's
responsibility.
our fault.
Kathy Aru, Kat Tim, great to see you here in New York.